Hey YouTube, today I'm going to do a canning video. I went to my local big box store and they had on sale chuck for a pretty decent price, so I bought about 12 pounds of it. I'm going to take that 12 pounds of chuck and can it. Alright, so for canning you're going to need some supplies. You're going to need a canning funnel, a jar lifter, a small spatula, a lid lifter, and you're going to need the lids and the rings and some canning jars. You can buy canning jars at pretty much any grocery store, Walmart. They're pretty prevalent. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do here is place my jar lids into some simmering water. This softens up the gasket on the underside of the lid, and it forms a better seal on the jar when you go to seal them up. Second thing I'm going to do is add some water to my canner. You can see that there's a line where the maximum fill level is. I'm going to fill this up with warm water. Also, you want to add a little bit of vinegar. That keeps the water, if you have hard water, from clouding up the jars as well as sticking to your canner. Add about 2 tablespoons to that and let that fill up. I'm going to take a wet cloth and wipe all the way around the gasket on the inside of the lid for my canner to make sure it's completely debris free, and it'll make a good seal. Also, I'm going to check that the locking mechanism is functioning correctly. When the inside of the canner is pressurized, the pressure actually pushes on this cap, and when it's pushed up to the top of the lid, it locks the canner, so you cannot get the lid off if there's pressure. Another thing you want to make sure of is that the pressure regulator stem is free of any debris that might cause overpressure. Sometimes the steam will leave a deposit of hard water stain inside there. You want to make sure that's all cleaned out. Okay, I'm going to put the canner on the stove now, and while the water in the canner is heating up, I'm going to cut up my chuck into about 1-inch size cubes. It just makes getting in the jar a lot easier, and you can actually pack a lot more of the meat in the jar when it's smaller pieces. Alright, I got the meat cut up now. I'm just going to add a little seasoning to it, a little salt, pepper, and some onion powder. Give it a little flavor. And I'm going to toss it on the stove and try to render it down a little bit, pull some of the fat out, and pull some of the moisture out of the meat as well. You don't have to season the meat before you cook it. In fact, you don't even have to cook it. I just prefer to do it this way. And now that my meat's on the stove, you can actually see some of the water that's drawing out of it. I'm not going to cook it all the way through because you do have to can it for 75 minutes, so it does cook the meat through and through during the canning process. Alright, I'm going to let this go now for maybe 2 or 3 more minutes. Alright, I got my lids. They're perfect now. About ready to do some canning. Okay, so we're ready to do the canning. I'm going to place my funnel over my jar and fill the jar with content. You can use tongs or a spoon, a ladle, whatever you have handy. They say not to pack it down, but I haven't had any problems in the past, so I try to pack as much in there as I possibly can. Next, you want to run a spatula around the inside of the jar and kind of pack the meat down just to make sure there aren't any voids that haven't been filled in the jar. That can cause problems when you put the jars into the pressure canner. If there's extra air inside the jars, they don't seal. Actually, before I ran that spatula around in there, I forgot to add salt. Typically I'll add about a teaspoon of salt for pint jars and maybe a teaspoon and a half for quart jars. And I'm going to have to run the spatula and mix this up again. Wipe the lid off again. And make sure everything's clean on there. Alright. For canning meat, you want about an inch of headspace between the contents and the lid of the can. Now wipe this down one more time, make sure it's all clean. You have to have it clean to really make a good seal. Alright, now I'm going to use my lid lifter to pull one of these lids from the hot water, place it on the top of the jar thusly. You got to make sure that the lids are lined up correctly on the jar. Place the ring over the top of the jar and twist it down, not too tight, but finger tight. I'm going to get the other 9 of these put in the pressure canner, and I will get back to you in a bit. Here's what it looks like. I have 10 pint-sized jars in here. I'm going to place the lid on the canner and turn up the heat. Okay, I've had it on the stove now for about 5 or 7 minutes now. You can see that there's enough pressure in there to actually lock the pressure canner. You can see the lock mechanism poking up there. Also, you'll notice there's a good amount of steam coming through the regulator vent. You want it to steam for about 10 minutes just to evacuate any of the excess air that's inside the canner. After it vents steam for 10 minutes, you want to place the regulator onto that stem there, and the pressure canner will begin to build pressure. Okay, it looks like we're around 10-11 pounds. So now I'm going to set my timer for 75 minutes and wait it out. I'll be back in 75 minutes, show you what it looks like. Okay, it's been about 45-50 minutes now. You can see my canner pinned out at 12 pounds, which is fine with me. 12 pounds is equivalent to about 245 degrees, so you can be guaranteed that there isn't going to be nasties or anything that's going to be alive in those jars. Now we got 26 minutes and change to go. I'll be back in about then. After 75 minutes, I did turn off the heat and waited for the pressure to go all the way to 0. Also, you can tell by the push-up lock that it's completely void of pressure. So I'm going to pull my pressure regulator off. When you pull the jars out, you want to have a cloth on your countertop just to keep the glass from cracking or breaking due to the difference in temperature. Always, when you take the lid off of a canner, pull the lid towards you such that the steam doesn't erupt into your face, because it's extremely hot and you can burn yourself. And I'll set the lid aside and have a look in there. You can see actually that the contents of the jars are still boiling. They're extremely hot. Now the lids at this point may or may not be fully seated. Actually, that looks like a pretty good job. It did not look like that any of the jars leaked at all. Okay, I'm going to let these jars cool off a little longer. They're still pretty hot. I'll pull them out of the pot after the content stops boiling. Alright, I'll take my jar lifters. These jars are still well over 150 degrees. These jar lifters are priceless. You need one if you're going to be doing this. So I'll pull them out of the water and set them gently on this towel. Actually, I'll double up this towel because it's only folded in half once. There really should be a little more insulation between this granite countertop and the bottom of those hot jars. So I'll pull these guys out of their little super heated bath and let them cool for about 8 hours. And that's about it. Guys have any questions? Post in the comments and I'll try to get to you when I can. Thanks for watching, SoCal Preppers. Please subscribe for more gear, guns, and prepping for what might come.